The United States was supposed to be the face of World Cup 2026. When FIFA announced that the biggest tournament in football history will be hosted across North America, there was never much doubt about where the spotlight was expected to fall. The United States would host the majority of the matches. The United States would host the final. The United States would provide the largest stadiums, the largest television market, and the largest commercial opportunities the sport had ever seen. Everything about FIFA's vision of World Cup 2026 pointed in one direction: America. But just days into the tournament, something unexpected is happening. The conversation is moving elsewhere. The most memorable atmosphere isn't coming from the United States. The most celebrated fan experiences aren't coming from the United States. Some of the most positive headlines aren't coming from the United States. Instead, two countries that were supposed to play supporting roles are quietly becoming the story of the tournament: Canada and Mexico. Now, to be clear, this isn't a football story in the traditional sense. This isn't about which national team is playing better football. This isn't about who will go further in the tournament. This is about perception, atmosphere, identity, and the growing feeling that while America may be hosting most of the matches, Canada and Mexico are winning the hearts of football fans around the world. Let's start in Mexico City, because if there was one image that captured everything FIFA wanted this World Cup to be, it was the opening night at the Azteca. More than 80,000 supporters, flags, songs, noise, generations of football history packed into a stadium that has already witnessed some of the sport's greatest moments. Pelé lifted a World Cup there. Maradona produced magic there. And when the 2026 tournament began, the atmosphere felt exactly like a World Cup should feel. The enthusiasm wasn't manufactured. It wasn't created by marketing campaigns. It wasn't dependent on celebrity appearances. It existed long before FIFA arrived. Mexico didn't need to be taught how to celebrate football. Football is already part of its culture, and that difference matters. Because one of the recurring criticisms surrounding this tournament has been the feeling that football is competing for attention in parts of North America rather than commanding it. In Mexico, there is no competition. Football is the main event. The crowds reflected that. The atmosphere reflected that. And fans watching around the world noticed immediately. But Mexico is only half the story, because something equally interesting has been happening north of the border. Canada's relationship with football has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. For decades, the country lived in the shadow of hockey. Football existed, but it rarely occupied the national conversation. Then came a new generation. Players emerged. Professional clubs developed. Youth participation exploded. And eventually Canada qualified for World Cups again. The country invested years building toward this moment. The result was visible during Canada's opening matches. Regardless of attendance debates, regardless of criticism surrounding ticketing, there was something undeniably significant about seeing World Cup football played on Canadian soil. For Canadian supporters, this wasn't just another tournament match. It was history. And unlike some of the controversy surrounding other parts of the tournament, Canada's football story felt authentic. It felt earned. Then came an incident that generated attention far beyond football itself. Omar Artan, the Somali referee, denied entry into the United States. A FIFA-appointed official unable to participate in the tournament after immigration complications. The story quickly became one of the biggest controversies of the opening week. FIFA's response was cautious. Officials emphasized that immigration decisions ultimately belong to sovereign governments. Legally, that is true, but many supporters felt the response lacked urgency. Then Canada stepped in. Canadian football authorities reportedly extended an invitation for Artan to participate in matches held on Canadian soil. It was a symbolic gesture, a small gesture, but symbolism matters, especially during moments like these. Because while FIFA was explaining what it could not do, Canada was being praised for what it tried to do. Again, the headlines were not about the United States. They were about Canada. And that's where this story becomes fascinating. Because World Cup tournaments are remembered for more than football. Think about previous editions. People remember South Africa's vuvuzelas. They remember Brazil's atmosphere. They remember Russia's surprises. They remember Qatar's organization. Every tournament develops an identity, an emotional memory, a story bigger than the matches themselves. And right now, the emotional story World Cup 2026 appears to be moving toward Canada and Mexico. That doesn't mean the United States is failing. Far from it. The United States has hosted major events successfully before. The stadium infrastructure is world-class. Transportation networks are extensive. Commercial performance has been extraordinary. Television audiences remain enormous. From a business perspective, FIFA is likely very happy with many aspects of the tournament, but football supporters often judge tournaments differently. Fans remember how a competition felt, not how much revenue it generated. And this is where the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. When supporters discuss Mexico, they talk about atmosphere. When supporters discuss Canada, they talk about hospitality. When supporters discuss the United States, many conversations quickly turn toward controversies. Visa complications, border concerns, ticket prices, empty seat debates, security discussions, political tensions. The football remains the same. The perception does not. Now, there is a counterargument worth considering. The United States was always going to face greater scrutiny. It is hosting more matches. It is hosting bigger matches. It is hosting the final. Naturally, more attention creates more criticism. A small issue in one country becomes a major international story when it occurs in the tournament's primary host nation. That is a fair point, and it explains part of what we're seeing, but only part of it, because perception isn't created by media coverage alone. Perception is created by experience. And many of the stories generating positive reactions right now are genuinely coming from Canada and Mexico. The images from Mexico City's opening celebration were real. The praise for Canadian football growth is real. The excitement surrounding both countries is real. The question is whether that trend continues. Because tournaments evolve. Group stages create one atmosphere. Knockout rounds create another. A World Cup often feels completely different 2 weeks later than it does during its opening days. The United States could still become the defining face of this competition. The final is there. The biggest commercial moments are there. Many of the tournament's most important matches are still to come. But first impressions matter. And the first impression of World Cup 2026 has surprised many observers. The biggest tournament in football history was expected to showcase American dominance. Instead, many supporters have found themselves talking about Canadian growth and Mexican passion. The countries expected to support the event are becoming central to it. And perhaps that's not a problem. Perhaps it's exactly what FIFA wanted. After all, this was never supposed to be an American World Cup. It was supposed to be a North American World Cup, a tournament shared across 3 nations, 3 football cultures, 3 identities. Maybe what we're witnessing isn't Canada and Mexico stealing the tournament at all. Maybe we're witnessing them claiming their share of it. But whether you describe it as sharing the spotlight or stealing it, one thing is becoming increasingly difficult to deny. A few days into World Cup 2026, some of the most memorable moments, the most celebrated atmospheres, and the most positive stories are coming from places many people expected to play secondary roles. And that reality is changing how this tournament is being viewed around the world. What do you think? Are Canada and Mexico becoming the real story of World Cup 2026? Or is it still too early to judge a tournament that has only just begun? Let us know below. And if you enjoy football analysis that looks beyond the scoreline, stay with us throughout the tournament because some of the biggest stories are happening far away from the pitch itself.